Have a line or do you care?
It doesn't matter. As long as you put down an email address that we can follow up if you're still interested.
There's a puppy together.
No, they can just. Oh, really? Okay. He's still listening. I
Hey everybody, we're going to get started. Hey everybody, we're going to get started. Thank you for the great turnout. Really appreciate it. Are you going to fix my AB? Yeah. Thanks. I want to thank everybody for attending and showing interest. My name's Stan Sugarman. I'm a developer consultant for the church. Welcome Pastor Cox and let him kind of open us up with an appropriate prayer convocation.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff Cooper. Let us pray. Most heavenly and gracious God, Lord, we come to you this evening thanking you for this day. We thank you for life, for health, and for strength. We thank you for each and every person gathered here this evening. And Lord, we pray now for your presence. We pray for your wisdom. We pray for your peace. We pray for a spirit of unity and a spirit of receptiveness. For God, we know that everything that we do, we want to be doing in decency and in order, and that it is pleasing in your sight. So Lord, come now, have your way in this place. Be with us, grant us courage, grant us wisdom for the living of these days. In your Son's name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you for all for coming out here. The congregation knows me. I'm a developer. I focus on a couple of things. Our passion is affordable housing, and we've been talking to the church for a couple of years about working together to kind of fit a huge need in Kirkwood. Don't know if you're aware of Kirkwood has not had an affordable housing development in 20 plus years. We have the lowest density of affordable units in the city. Parkview south of us has more affordable units than we do. And that's a household, 250 households, I believe. We're 2,200. So every opportunity I can to preach about affordable housing to neighbors, I do it. And the good Lord let us come to an idea here. So this is the corner lot at Holman and Howard. The church would be the owners of it, derive all benefits, and compliance and requirements would go with the church. What we're exploring is permanent supportive housing. It's something I've been very involved with the last 6 years since COVID, 5 years. And it's the only way to end homelessness. Brad, who runs In-Town Cares, and Tracy Woodward, who was our caseworker actually last year, can speak about the prevalence of homelessness in Kirkwood. It's become kind of an epidemic. I believe, Tracy, we had 35 people we counted last year.
Yeah, that's correct.
So we have 35 people in our neighborhood experience homelessness on every day. And I would argue there's probably more that through shame, a lot of different reasons, they're just not willing to share their housing struggles. It's hard to ask for help. Tracy does it every day, trying to reach out to people and creating it. And the face of homelessness in Atlanta, and particularly Kirkwood, is people who just can't keep up with the rapid rise in housing. I don't have to tell you how much housing's risen in Kirkwood in the last 20 years. So what we're asking to do is to do a planning charrette with you. This young man next to me, Kenny, we've known for a while. He is a very talented architect with a great firm, Smith Dahlia. They actually worked on the only two affordable housing projects in Kirkwood, Kirkwood Gardens and Presley Woods. And they've done projects all over the city of various scales and sizes, and Kenny can boast in a little bit. But that's all we're asking for today, is just to have a listening session, show you where we're going with it and why we want to do it and kind of what it looks like. I will share that, you know, the housing assistance is not free. It comes with a lot of requirements. It's a 30-year commitment by the church to get the funding. And it comes with wraparound services, social workers, case workers, partners for home. Probably the closest thing that it looks like is Presley Woods, which is also in Kirkwood. It's the crown jewel in Partners for Home portfolio. They have 20 projects across the city. The best outcomes are at Presley Woods, by far. Kirkwood is their high achiever. You know, we have all the social services. We now have a grocery store. We're a great neighborhood for them. There is MARTA here. We're bike friendly. We have a lot of things going for us. So, you know, our ask today is just to keep an open mind and kind of listen to what we're wanting to do, and happy to answer questions for a few minutes. And then we'll go with Kenny on the planning side. No question? Nothing? Okay. All right, Kenny.
I have a question.
Sure.
How would you vet the people? Do they need to do this, or do they?
So that's a good question. So they get vetted, and In-Town Cares, Brad, and probably they're the experts. They could tell you better than me. If Tracy or Brad, one of you want to come up and talk about how.
Can I add on to that? And this is probably the right person to answer. You used the phrase "it's supportive." Repeat it again for me.
Permanently supportive housing.
Can you define that and kind of, as you kind of explain everything that goes with that? Like,
Sure, I'll explain it actually. I'm probably more in that world because I'm the housing provider. So permanently supportive housing means all the tenants come in, they get a 1-year lease, which automatically renews as long as they work the program and they meet all the requirements of our project's assistance. In this project, it would be 30% AMI, so they have to make under 36,000 a month, or 36,000 a year, excuse me, a month. 36,000 a year, I think is, no, 30% AMI, sorry.
Less than that.
Yeah, that's 50, I got 50 in my head for some reason. Yeah,
It's
it's
like 22,
24. It's 24, sorry, it's 24,000. And then there is a workforce
Hey,
requirement.
Stan, sorry, could you define AMI real quick? Just
Oh, average median income, sorry, I'm a developer, right, all the buzzwords. So everything the government measures is based on this HUD survey that's put out every year saying this is our household income, this is rental costs, They do this huge rent survey and they publish this data. And everybody in Atlanta and across this country, for our federal funding, we follow this AM. There's all these rules around what we do. It's a huge bureaucracy. And Brad can tell you about his side of the bureaucracy, because when we do this, it's not just us. It's 12 to 14 different organizations working together in the bureaucracy. So there's a lot of checks and balances, and it's definitely a collaborative effort.
Sure. Hey, my name's Brad Schweers, Executive Director of In-Town Cares. We're a nonprofit based out of Druid Hills Presbyterian Church on Ponce, but we work in neighborhoods all across the city. So a couple words about kind of the state of homelessness in Atlanta right now. I learned this last week. For last year, the city of Atlanta, the whole kind of system, we placed more people into housing than any other year in the city's history. And for every person we placed into housing, 2.5 people entered homelessness. And so for every person exiting homelessness, 2.5 people are entering homelessness. And this is actually a pretty good ratio compared to a lot of cities. There are cities in California that have 7 or 8 people entering homelessness for every person exiting homelessness. So housing ends homelessness is basically as simple as it gets. There's a lot of work that goes into that, but housing is the solution. We're working to try to support building housing wherever it comes from. So permanent supportive housing is for people who are chronically homeless, which is it's actually a technical definition. People who've been experiencing homelessness for at least a year or a total of a year in a 3-year period, and who have a disabling condition. So those two factors together, so there's a time and a disability component, qualify for permanent supportive housing, which we've placed 1,400 people into permanent housing in the last 7 years as an organization, and 98% of our folks go into permanent supportive housing. So that's the kind of housing we're talking about here. Our case managers, Tracy being one of our amazing case managers and program managers, connect with people where they're sleeping. We have an office, people can come to our office, but we come to people. So we just, Rachel Knowles is a new case manager who's working in Kirkwood as of a couple of weeks ago. We're doing kind of a soft launch, and so you'll hear more about that. But she gets to know people where they're living, builds trust. Trust is the currency we work with. Those 1,400 people we placed into housing, we had to earn trust with every single one of them. And that takes time. Sometimes that's a week or two. Sometimes it's 5 years. We've had a guy we've placed into housing in Ponce Highland who'd been homeless for decades, and after 6 years, he said, "I'm interested in your program." So, but we had to show up again and again and again over that period of time, and there's no other way. So getting people connected, that's our job, kind of navigating them through the bureaucracy, which is no small feat. And then as people move into housing, they have a housing voucher, which is a permanent voucher for them, and then they also have support services. So this is called the housing first approach, if people are familiar. It's not housing only. It's not, you take someone and say, dump them into an apartment and say, good luck. Someone who hasn't been housed in 20 years. No, there's support services. So that's part of what this program would be, is the housing itself, a voucher, and then supportive services from an agency that specializes in helping people not only stay housed, but thrive, live an abundant life like all of the rest of us want. So that's a little about In-Town Cares, a little bit about the process. Let me have Tracy speak to you for a second.
Hi, everybody. So I have been doing some case management in this neighborhood, and that means going into the woods, under bridges, over by the highway, where people tend to hang out. And one of the things that I like to tell everyone is I have been doing this work since I was 18, and I have always felt safe because the unhoused recognize helpers, and they're very protective of them. And that's one of the things that I love about supportive housing, that it is safe for the people who live there, and it is safe for the neighborhood. There's actually quite a bit of supportive housing in most of the neighborhoods in Atlanta now. You find in Virginia Highlands, they're building some they have some in West End. A lot of the neighborhoods are building the supportive housing. Did I lose my signal? I'll just speak really loud. And you wouldn't know it's there because we have developers who are able to build beautiful buildings that perfectly integrate into the neighborhood.
We're back.
And not only do they integrate with the neighborhood so that you wouldn't even notice it, they're secure. The new supportive housing that they built downtown, they have locking doors. You can only get in and out if you have a key. If you are not a resident, you have to show photo ID to the security guard, and that is to keep the residents safe and the neighborhood safe. I feel very safe when I go into supportive housing communities, and the people who move in get better so quickly, because when you've been on the street for many years, you're depressed, you're malnourished, you're not sleeping enough. But if you put someone into housing, they can move on to better problems. When I work with someone who's moved into housing, I can start talking to them and say, would you like to finish your GED? Would you like to start thinking about jobs? Maybe we could talk about adopting a pet, right? Really, you cannot ask them to start working on their problems, like, working on their mental health, working on any of these other things, if they're on the sidewalk, right? You have to start with housing before you can move on to other solutions. Any questions? I think I saw a hand raised over in that corner. No? Perfect.
How do you deal with the mental health challenges? I mean, like, some of this seems like very deep rooted, and I'm concerned about, we're bringing them into the neighborhood. You're bringing a whole collection of people who have had long-term housing. It's something more than just not being able to afford a house, but there's underlying problems that are contributing to it, and that makes me concerned in terms of you've got a lot of mental health issues that can't be dealt with overnight. Like, you can't flip a switch on that.
I agree, and that's why they include psychiatric services in supportive housing. For example, if you go to the Melody downtown, they have professional clinicians who have an office there on the site, and they check on people sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, just knocking on the door and say, hey, did you eat today? Did you take your pill? Do we need to talk to somebody about this? And that's the thing, if someone's housed, they're findable, and you can bring resources to them. And also, I would point out that anyone who's been on the street is gonna have a mental health diagnosis just because you're not sleeping enough, you're not eating enough, you never feel safe. But if you put them in housing and they don't have to worry about where they're gonna sleep, where they're gonna get their next meal, the mental health just goes down dramatically in a very short period of time. So housing really does help with the mental health. So again, I never feel unsafe. Does that answer your question?
Will there be an office like that here?
Yes.
Yes.
What was the question?
Will there be an office like that here?
Yes.
Which is yes.
Yes.
I appreciate that you guys started with the Q&A, but maybe if we jump into the presentation, some of this question would be answered.
It's not a presentation. I want to be very clear. We're doing a planning charrette. We're going to give you some ideas, some thoughts, and we're going to go back and change everything based on the feedback in the room. With the church congregation being the final decision makers, because this is the church's property. This is their property. What?
What's the purpose of this?
We have this planning charrette, so we want to hear from you. So, but there seemed to be some misinformation kind of coming out about this. So I wanted to start with the Q&A to kind of alleviate fear. Yeah.
How is this funded? I know you said the church is supporting it, but who is funding the services?
So Fulton County has agreed to fund these services for the next 30 years.
And we're not concerned about cuts and stuff?
So Fulton County has funding it out of their budget. So that Fulton County has that. Atlanta Housing would be a portion.
Yeah, but we're in the cap.
Well, but partners, a lot of.
Folks, can we let people speak one at a time?
Yeah, I can't.
So yes, we're in DeKalb County, but Fulton County is providing the mental health services for this program. So they cross county lines for City of Atlanta. It's a joint venture between City of Atlanta and Fulton County. They work very well together. I think the partnership's been around, what, 8 years now? Yeah. So they're very committed to it. That's how Partners County was created, is they kind of created this partnership. And so all the funding sources will identify. For the most part, it's capital. And then the last thing will be the rental assistance. It'll be the caseworkers from Fulton County. And that's really the only ongoing financial support we'll need. And so, yes, if Atlanta Housing or Fulton County cease existing tomorrow, we're in trouble. But I'm a developer and we're in a place of worship. I mean, I feel like we have to have some optimism and work together to have a better future. So there was another question.
Have you looked at any other locations, just since okay. I feel like you
yes.
dismissed me because I wasn't finished.
Sorry.
That's okay. So just since I've learned about this, I've been doing some driving, and actually I've housed homeless people from the VA, so I understand it. I'm not afraid of homeless people. I will be living across the street. That's not my issue. But I do worry that it's a residential neighborhood, and the two places that I've saw, just by driving by, one of them is right next to 1693 Hosea Williams, also a big church lot. There are commercial units next to apartment complexes on either side. The other one that I saw was on Moreland Avenue, right next to Edgewood. There's a big lot there, very similar size, also all high-density housing. And that's my concern, is that there's, that we're talking about a very residential neighborhood, and if it can be put in a neighborhood with higher density, where it's easier, for example, in Edgewood, just to walk, or take MARTA.
What about these units? Is it
Excuse me. I don't want to minimize what you're saying, but every neighborhood we go into and we evangelize affordable housing. We're in construction on a project on Moreland Avenue. It was posted on Facebook. The street's too busy. My residents are going to get killed. What was the other concerns? Not enough green space. It's too dense. There were a couple others, and the same thing was that. I mean, there's always a better property. The issue is we've been searching. I mean, I've been in Kirkwood wanting to do this 6 years. I'll be honest. And I think if you talk to a commercial property owner who has something vacant, I've talked to them and tried to cut a deal.
Well, are you open to us trying to negotiate with the owners to see if something like that would be possible? Because it is a matter of high density versus low density.
That would be a decision for the church. I'm just a partner. I mean, if your question is, if we would like to do this project again, the answer is yes. The city wants to develop 20,000 affordable units across the city. That's going to only happen 40, 100, 200 at a time. So the answer is we're always looking for land. There's a couple developers in the room. I mean, who are mission-based. The answer is always we're open mind, but I'm not the decision maker in the room. I'm filming right now and kind of doing it just to get comments, and we're going to play it back and we're going to talk about it. There's some parishioners in the room. So, yeah.
This may be an incorrect assumption, so just correct me if I'm wrong. But, so I'm a pediatrician. I work with a population that deals with housing insecurity, unstable housing quite a bit. And so I was just wondering that it seems like this project is maybe more geared towards individuals who are experiencing homelessness. Have we talked about making it more family-oriented, so families who have housing insecurity, and making it like a safe space for mother and children to move in? We have a daycare right here. We have Tumor, which has low enrollment and benefit from that. Have there been any thoughts about kind of gearing it more towards that at all?
So we looked at that, and so that's a different financial program, and that gets very tough, and the site didn't score for it. At the end of the day, there was 20 factors, and it didn't score.
Explain more about that.
Better.
Can you explain that?
I mean, we could go down the LIHTC world all the way, but
Explain
It would-
LIHTC. Explain
yeah.
LIHTC.
I mean, LIHTC is a form of tax credits. Basically, you build affordable housing and you sell the tax credits to pay the affordable housing. It would be a lot denser, it'd be a lot bigger, and we need a lot of parking. The tax credit investor is traditionally Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or some big institution. They have a formula. You know, we did look at that at one point, it just didn't work. 20 different reasons, but it just didn't work. Most of those projects, Atlanta Housing is getting those tax credits in the city of Atlanta. There's only so many tax credits, and Atlanta Housing has a fast pass, and they own 300 acres of undeveloped land, so all those fast passes are going to their project.
Over here.
I'm here to learn, hopefully a lot tonight, and learned a good bit so far. I'm kind of want to take a step back and just kind of ask a who's who question. I've heard about 16 allusions to 16 organizations working the bureaucracy together. You guys are representing various organizations. I hear the church is committed for 30 years. You know, if this project is moving forward, I'm interested in knowing kind of who's got skin in the game, what that skin is, and not just, you know, there's a, you know, understanding and trust dimension of that. There's a roles and responsibilities and accountabilities dimension to that. So can you, even if you're going to repeat yourself in some cases, kind of take a step back and explain that entire thing? And I'd actually be interested in hearing from the church, since so far I've heard they have the largest and longest term skin in the game. I'd be interested in hearing their perspective on their interest in this project.
So essentially, each of these projects are built bespoke. We go out, we identify the project, we get a couple pieces, and then we go out to philanthropic capital and a couple other things. Because the church is a nonprofit, I don't qualify for it, so there'll be some new partners most likely. There'll be some partners that were in our other projects, so it might be Invest Atlanta. It might be the city of Atlanta with federal funds. It might be Atlanta Housing. It might be the Federal Home Loan Bank. It might be a philanthropic capital. Community Foundation is a huge player in providing philanthropic capital. It could be the Home Depot Foundation if we work with veterans. It could be 20 different things, but we have to, it's kind of the capital, we identify some of the capital now, but most of the capital won't come in until a lot farther in the process.
Hey Stan, who's the we? Could you just clarify who the we is?
So it's basically me and my employees at Stride. So we assemble we do this a couple times a year on various projects, and this unaffordable, we have enough experience, so we do it in-house. There's a couple of us at Stride that work on this, and then we have compliance person, we have a bunch of people with construction management. So we have a small development company. This is kind of a passion project. I've agreed to donate the profit for the deal to the church as part of this.
So I work so Stan's in the construction world, so I've been doing this at my job for 15 years. I'm getting to know the housing side of things, and I still have a lot to learn. Kind of on the social services, kind of homeless services side of things. So we're an outreach and navigation organization. So we, as I mentioned, we connect with people. The first time we usually meet somebody is in their tent or wherever they're sleeping. We get to know them. We kind of walk them through the process, which is obtaining documentation, all of these pieces, and then we get people to like the threshold of their new place. We've taken them, put them in our vans, and gone to visit and said, "Hey, is this a good neighborhood? Do you like this? No? Okay. Well, we'll wait for the next housing to become available. Once people apply, they're approved. They've got a new case manager. We then pull back, kind of transfer off the caseload. There's a network there's a computer network of everybody who's experiencing homelessness. So this new housing provider now, which is another nonprofit. There's about 20 housing providers that do support services. We transfer that client to this new housing provider. We typically will, some people are like, great, I got a new case manager, and some people are like, it took me 5 years to trust anybody, why are you abandoning me? We'll say, that's fine, like, we'll do this over time. So we kind of, that's our kind of niche, is from first contact up to housing, then people kind of connect with the housing.
You really wouldn't be involved in the administration of this at all, right? So there's another entity to be determined.
Yeah, so that would
There's
be.
a developer who, builds a property and kind of washes their hands of it. There's you guys who, identify good prospects for,
Power
residents.
on.
Yeah,
And then there's still another
There's a management
organization.
yeah, there's management, there's a housing provider organization, which my guess, typically how these things work is, like, there'd be a number to call of like, hey, so, there's a concern in the neighborhood, call their housing case manager. We officially, again, we're really more out in the field. Over time, we transfer a caseload to some new person, but we'll oftentimes stay in touch with folks. But you'll have a number to call of the housing case manager for the project.
Yeah.
So does the funding stipulate that these support services have to be in place at
Yes.
all times?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
at some point, if someone leaves, they're just gone and you don't have that support?
No, everything is a big circle. Everything lives and dies on something else.
It is, so together that is called permanent supportive housing, or PSH. It's this package. There is no other, there is no housing without support services, there's no support services without the housing, and there's a dedicated case manager who usually has a caseload of between 15 and 20 people, depending on.
So our program that we're working with, it's 2 caseworkers for every 20 people. So
Okay,
they trade off. There's that's why there's coverage all the time.
okay, yeah, so so each caseworker is working with each of their clients for 4 hours a week, which is that's a pretty good ratio, in most places.
We got a question over here.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I'm sure a lot of people are curious about how this affects taxes, and I'm by no means an expert on taxes at all. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to, because I know at the beginning you said that the church would be the owners and derive all the benefits. I'm also assuming the church is tax exempt. How would this affect taxes in the neighborhood? I know you said Fulton County's providing many of the services, but can you explain a bit more about?
Well, so the property taxes are going to the city of Atlanta and DeKalb County. So Fulton County is just providing this service in DeKalb County. It's the only service where they cross the lines. And then property tax wise, it's not gonna affect you practically.
Is the church collecting rent then? How is the church maintaining a tax exempt status?
So they don't collect rent, they derive, well, I say that. So there probably is a ground rent component of it, because they're donating the land into that state.
Is that going back into the community?
Well, I mean, it's going into to the church, and they're investing in the community.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
I don't want there to get to be any misinformation around that. So I'm Jeff Cooper, I'm the pastor of the church. As he's already mentioned, our main contribution to this is that we own the land, right? So the land at the corner is owned by the church. I've been the pastor here for a couple of years, and so when I got here, the church had owned this land for about 20 years. The desire was to do something with the land, right? What can we do with the land? The other part of that desire was we want to do something good for Kirkwood. And so it's not just about trying to do something, we could sell the land and get money if it was just we want a check. It was, what do we do with this land that the forefathers of Turner, the foremothers of Turner, sought to try to invest in the community? What can we do with it in a way that will not only benefit Turner, the church, but benefit Kirkwood? And we've entertained a lot of different conversations. We've entertained a lot of different people who wanted to do different things with it. The reason that we went ahead with this particular option was because we believed that this was an opportunity to help meet a need in this community. As we've already, and I won't rehash all the aspects that have already been over about the need of homelessness, we see that, we pass it. Our goal at the end of the day is to simply be a good neighbor, which is why we wanted to have this. Let me ask, what's the purpose of this meeting? The meeting is because we have started conversations, but we don't want to get down the line of conversations, because anything we do at that corner, is going to impact everybody in this room. Not just the potential future residents, but every person who owns a piece of property. And so our goal is to be a good neighbor. One of the things that we want to be a good neighbor for is we want to make sure that this church that sits in the middle of this community doesn't look like it looks good. We want to make sure that we're able to continue to provide services to those who are in need in this community, many of whom may become residents here. Our goal is to be a mission-oriented church with whatever we do. And so I just want to make sure that when he's talking about deriving the benefit, yes, we would donate the land to the project. That cash flow would help us to be able to maintain our ministries here, our outreach services that we do as a part of our church here. It's about being able to fund, and without going down a rabbit hole, the reality of religious institutions in this day and age is that we have to be creative in how we meet the needs that we're trying to meet as part of our mission. And so we looked at this as an opportunity for a bunch of different things to come together to do something good for Kirkwood.
Is the church paying the partners in it?
I'm sorry?
Is the church then donating what they're receiving from the rent and everything to those like 14 to 16 organizations that are helping provide services?
There's a whole nother network of funders for the homeless services, of philanthropic and governmental and corporate funders.
Could there be public transparency of the cash flow to the church?
In terms of how much the church gets on an annual basis?
How it's using the money that would come from the fund?
It's gonna be a public flat. The answer is, everything we do, every one of these projects that we take in money in, on my projects and like Presley Woods, or, well, not Garden, but Presley Woods, that's three keys. They do filings to the city, for Partners for Home and a couple other places, Atlanta Housing. So it is full financial transparency.
Ongoing transparency.
Yes, for the 30 years of the project.
Got a question over here. My original question was, what is the purpose of this meeting?
Exactly.
To do the planning charrette.
That's not what it said, the flyer I got.
Flyer was not from them.
Well, that was the planning charrette invitation. Yes, we wanted to do a planning charrette.
Rezoning of 78 and 88 house here.
That was not your flyer.
That was not.
That was sent out by somebody else.
That was sent out.
I got the same thing.
Yeah.
Do you live close by?
I live next.
Yeah,
He's
I live
right
on
next
the street.
to
I got
it.
the same thing.
Is this a zoning meeting?
No.
Thank you.
There's another question over here.
All right. Yes, sir.
What is the property zone right now?
I imagine it's R4, I believe.
R4A. What is that?
Yeah, can you explain that?
Explain
You could subdivide, the church could sell the land and subdivide it and build 4 single-family houses.
So it's single family housing, correct?
Correct.
So in order for this to go forward, it would have to get zoning approval, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, we work with the community and the city.
So we're doing a charrette before it's been approved.
Well, so that's how it works in Atlanta, is we have to show a proposal that we want to build to get the rezoning. So we'd like to work with you to design something that everybody can live with.
So you're saying it's automatically going forward then, is what you're saying?
No, nobody said that.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's been my impression.
That's certainly the
Yeah.
impression.
No, we're gonna take this all in and go back to they're the bosses. It's their property, they're running the show.
And what happens if the church, since it's a 30-year program, what happens if the church shuts down within that 30 years?
Our church has been around since 1899.
But it's still.
We have been through Atlanta race riots. We have been through 2 world wars. We have been through several other wars. We've been through.
But that
Great Depression.
Yeah, so, yeah, it doesn't answer the
We-
question.
I'm gonna get to the answer to the question.
Okay.
We have been through several things. Nobody can predict any future. When you go and sign a mortgage, there's a possibility you could lose your job in 5 years. There's a possibility that anything can happen.
So what?
But what I will say is that we are operating, and we have operated, and God has been faithful to this church for 125 years. And so I don't have any reason to believe that we would not be in the ability to continue to sustain that for any time forward.
But that didn't answer my question.
Well, the answer to the question is that there is no way for anybody to predict with certainty what will happen 30 years from now.
What could happen?
What could happen
wait.
if the church?
In the event,
The property.
To the
worst
property?
case scenario, in the event that the church no longer exists, what would happen to the property?
Will the
That's what
property
she's
have a
asking.
deed restriction on it that's
Well,
like
yes.
enforceable? And so I think just to think through, like, there would be a deed restriction on the property, so any owner who then purchases it, or it's sold to subsequently, if the church fails in any way, would then be subject to follow those regulations.
Well-
Carried with the land, if, I'm assuming this is someone, like,
Yeah, even worse, worse if you think about it, they can't sell it without permission from those organizations.
yeah, so there's, it's
They
all
have a-
very regulated, there's a lot of oversight, these things don't get transferred without a lot of people weighing in and making sure
Vetting the
services
buyer,
are provided.
vetting the buyer is big. Vetting the buyer is big. Rebecca in the back there has been very patient.
Yes, I'm a Kirkland neighbor, and I'm really enthusiastic to see more affordable housing, especially supportive affordable housing in the community. A lot of my family members and friends would like to live here, and they can't afford to do so. So thank you for bringing this project to the community as an idea. My question is about transportation. Is there an aspect of the supportive services that provides access to MARTA cards and other transportation services?
So Partners for Home has been, and it's spotty because MARTA's been changing the program on it, but they do hand out cards, unfortunately, but the card program is not as robust as we would like. And then, we have a nonprofit partner that their donation is van service. They do some van rides a couple of times a week. You can see the van at Presley Woods, you're gonna see it at the motel when we hit. We're not at where they will provide the service, unfortunately. We have to get to a certain number of units.
I would like to put in that when you have case managers in supportive housing, they do help with other resources for transportation. For example, if you have Medicaid insurance, you can call ahead to have, Medicaid will pay for Ubers to take you to your doctor's appointments. If you have a diagnosis, your doctor can help you fill out a form so that you get MARTA half fare cards. There are definitely shortcuts to getting transportation if you're in supportive housing.
Yes.
Right now, it's zoned for 4 single-family houses, is that correct?
We haven't done a planning charrette, but for that, but it's approximately 4 or 5. I think there used to be 5 there.
So going into was it Lido, whatever the matrix was, how many units do you propose for this to make financial
Well,
sense?
can we go into the planning charrette?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, I'm gonna let Kenny take over and kind of show it, since this is his forte.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Kenny Turner Ame with Smith Elliott Architects. We've got Landon Clark in the back there too. Smith Elliott has a 20-plus year history of working on affordable housing projects, supportive housing projects. Most recent one was Macaulay Park, which is a partnership with Mercy Care on DeKalb, right off of King Memorial, that have supportive units in it. So just a really fast primer on Smith Elliott. So the point, like Stan was saying, of this is a charrette to show you guys some options. And I definitely don't want you to think that any of these are baked all the way through. We have 2 options we're gonna show you. And the purpose of those options are to solicit feedback. So, and we tried to make them as different as possible. What always happens is, like Stan said, we're gonna go back, take this feedback, scramble it, put it back together, and we'll come up with a kind of the next iteration of the process. But in the design process, we're very early, and this is by no means finished. So, we're talking about the corner of Hallman and Howard, as everyone knows. It's right over there. I don't want to talk about that too much. You guys know what it looks like, probably. So option number one is kind of the more straightforward option, kind of typical apartment building floor plan. So by zoning and because of the way the site is and its topography, we're pushing all the units towards the sidewalk so that the units that are in blue are closest to the sidewalk. We have to do streetscape improvements on both streets. So there's a zoning requirement for a planting zone and a clear sidewalk zone. In both options, also, we're proposing to add parallel parking spaces, which would be inside of our property. So right now, people are parked on the street, but these would be dedicated parallel parking spaces that are in the property to allow the two-way traffic to be a little bit wider. So the main thing I wanted you to take away from this scheme is that it holds the corner with that orange space, which is where the supportive offices would be and where the main entrance is, and where kind of a communal porch would be, which is different than the next option. But a lot of the focus of the way that this building works is that it's got internal circulation, which is the yellow bit, and then it's focused a lot on the courtyard on the inside, which has got, right now there are trees there. It's kind of gonna be the place where the residents hang out, get fresh air. And because of the topography, once you're up at the street level and you go back down, on the back side of this L, it's gonna be like a walkout basement. So the height of the building is really concentrated on the back side. So the main design challenge when it comes to the form of the building, not how the building works, is how do we integrate into a single family home neighborhood? How do we make a building that's got a bunch of units work in with its context?
I have a thought.
Yes.
Is it possible, I understand the connectivity of the building being important for flow and security. Howard is probably from a scale and form perspective, it's probably the most historic street in Kirkwood. It might be the most historic street this side of Moreland Avenue. Could you guys consider, instead of one larger building, 4 buildings that look more like historical single family homes?
Yes, that would be option number.
I think that would be, there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk. Oh, I missed that. Was that another?
No, we're about to go to it.
Oh.
Yeah, that'll be, we'll talk about that. It won't be 4, but it'll be, yeah.
Could you also say how many parking spots when you go through these options, how many parking spots? Because I know you said there was some parallel parking inside, but how many? Because that's a big issue in Holman.
And how many units are in this particular option?
Yeah, 55 to 60 units. There's four parallel parking spaces on Howard. And then there is a little bit of parking off of Hallman. That's actually a curb cut, mostly for the office folks to be able to park.
What about on-site parking for residents if you have 65 units?
Well, 30% AMI can't afford a car. The math is relentless on that. What?
If the goal is for them to transition into.
So they usually can't, you usually can't in Atlanta afford a car till you hit 50 to 60% AMI.
At which point they transition.
They transition to a different income level.
There are lots of homeless people who live in their cars.
I mean,
So there's no parking on site whatsoever for 65 units?
so we can provide a traffic study, happy to do it. We did it for Kirkwood, across our, and Presley Woods, you can go count it. The residents don't own cars. Out of 1,000 units, 2 people own cars.
What's the square footage of the unit if there's 65?
It's probably about 300 square feet,
Yeah,
350.
they're pretty small.
Yeah.
Are these 3 stories?
These are, so they're micro apartments?
They are micro apartments.
They're efficient.
It's 3 stories on the front and 4 stories on the back.
So do they have?
No, it's 2 on the front.
So 300
Sorry,
square
yeah,
feet.
you're right.
It's two on the front, 3 on the back.
So if they're
You gotta do it.
300 square feet, are there kitchens or anything in these?
There are kitchens, and then we have a communal area, that there's an amenity area on the courtyard,
So it's just for single people, but not people with children?
not with
They
people.
can't benefit from
Not even couples?
So what we found with experiencing with homelessness, our target audience and what we build to is the typical homeless person in Atlanta right now is over 45 to 50 years old. The population skews older, And that's who we're building to, is kind of that. If you walk around downtown Kirkwood and you talk to our homeless, they're typically over 50, they're single, they don't have family ties, they don't have kids. You know, they've kind of been abandoned in Kirkwood, to be honest. But we have 20 long-term tenants or homeless people that live in Kirkwood right now that are kind of wandering our neighborhood, sleeping in different ways. That's tough.
I know it looks today like sort of one single contiguous lot, but it is actually 2 lots there, is that right?
Yes.
Correct.
So is this both lots together?
Yes, we plat them together.
Okay. Thank you.
Could you point out where you were gonna provide the wraparound services? I think you referenced an in-house clinical area for both acute preventative care, some other things. And can you also elaborate on and define what these wraparound services are, since they're gonna be essential in the success?
So it's the orange area. So it's a couple different things. So for every 20 tenants, there'll be 2 social workers essentially. So they'll have offices in the orange area, and then some Mercy Care and a couple other healthcare and social services providers. I'm not speaking loud enough. But the social workers and that, they use offices, so those offices for the most part are flex, and they come in and provide services. And then for more pressing things, there's Whiteford nearby, DeKalb Medical Services, Grady has a clinic in our neighborhood. There's a lot of services already here where either they can walk or they get transported through casework or through a van service.
So will that orange area look like an office front, or will it be?
It will look, well, you want to go to the next one? Yeah.
And then also, each unit, is that a single occupancy, or is that multiple?
We're run under fair housing. So theoretically, it could do 2 people, but the problem with 2 people is AMI is only about $3,000 more for the second person. So if we're doing our jobs right, they're not gonna last long in our services. Occasionally we get somebody, but usually because they get the income up, the social workers have to go find them a 40 or 50% AMI apartment. Yes.
It doesn't seem like there's even enough parking for the services personnel that would be at the site every day.
So that's why we're doing six spaces is for the services. And then the church has they're surrounded by a parking lot. They'd walk over.
So if you guys are looking for input, why do we need 65 units? I think everybody in here is okay with density, but do we really need 65 units in a place that could have technically right now 4 houses?
So 4 houses, well, I think it had 5 before.
Well, right now it's 2 lots.
I mean,
So right now it could have 2.
Well, at some point it had 5 houses based on some of the historical records I saw.
20 people to possibly 2 to 3.
Well, back, we talk about it. Households in Atlanta used to be 8 people. So yes, today it's 2 or 3 people, but
I got 9 at my house.
Well, yeah, Jonathan has 10.
I do have 10 actually.
Yeah. Well, fair.
The question is, have you considered putting 10 to 15?
Well, the question would be, I'm not trying to be silly here.
Yeah.
If you had 4 houses, and you had my family in all 4, you'd have 40 people, So it's, even though single occupancy apartment buildings, the density conversation is very interesting because the idea of what he's talking about in affordable housing standpoint doesn't function the same way as single family housing does from an occupancy standpoint.
Yeah.
So while most of us have 2 or 3 or 4 people who live in our house, some of us don't. And there's not a regulation. If I had more kids, I could have 20 people live in my house.
Yeah, no, there's kind of a fair housing, and as somebody who falls under fair housing, I'm always scared to say things. But you really can't restrict how many people live in a house under our Constitution. So yes, we could do less density. The answer is, but we're doing a range, and one of the things we want to do by putting more units in, it seems counterintuitive, but I get more services the more people are here. We get we get more nonprofit partners, we get more attention. So it's a mix, I agree. But we have more security hours, we have more resources, we provide a better experience with more
You
people.
get more issues. as well.
We do not have more issues.
AMI building,
What?
if it's a 30% AMI building, and I guess the max income is 22,000, I guess.
24, yeah.
24, what's the monetary commitment of the residents? How much do they,
They have to pay 30% of their income.
but there's a ceiling that's set on that by the.
So if it's 24,000, it's to be 7,200 a month,
So
or a
they
year.
have, no.
Yeah.
Per unit, what's the per unit
Per unit.
cost? If I was gonna pay 100% of it, I'm not talking.
So you can't do it. I mean,
I'm saying, how much is the city kicking in?
we don't know.
What's the total?
It'll depend. There's a formula. They don't tell us what that is till essentially right around the time we get our financial commitments.
So essentially, someone has no income, they could still live there, but it'd be
There is no
fully
monetary
subsidized by these programs, basically.
So the church is.
Theoretically, but it's really hard to have no income in America. There's always housing assistance, there are food stamps, those count. The social workers are very good at taking advantage of the 30 different programs that you can sign up for.
Since we have the 111 Moreland, since that's being built, how much per unit does since you guys own and operate that one, how much per unit do you get if it's a zero, I don't know.
So with utilities and internet, I think I get 1,016.
So 65, in theory, 65 grand a month
No.
goes to the church. And
No,
then
I
who's paying
mean,
that
it's,
65?
yeah.
But who's paying the 65? Like, that's per that 1,000 that you get every month.
I mean, that would be from Atlanta Housing, but, I mean, that's utilities, that's internet, that's all my services. So start creeping into that, there's not much income. I think we have a 1.1 debt coverage. So for 65,000, there are $59,000 in expenses.
Could we see the next option?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so I just want to say a couple quick things about this first option, elevation-wise, is the task here is to break the mass down into bite-sized pieces so that it really feels like it's part of the neighborhood and is not a giant apartment complex. We are actually able to step the building along Hallman also.
Speaking of elevation, just real quick, how are you planning for any kind of drainage issues? I mean, that lot is notorious for just flooding the lot.
Yeah, and just by developing it, we'll improve that because of the standard codes that we have to apply. You know, there are things that we have to do for treatment of water, and then also when it enters the system, we have to hold the water for a certain amount of time in different structures and things like that. So the situation, if it's a developed piece of land, will be better than what it is now.
We have to connect to the city storm system.
Is there a contingency plan if that doesn't work? Because that's our lot.
It's we have to connect to the city storm system. So that freshly paved Hallman Street, we'll tear it up.
But it's notorious for having issues, and even after improvements, we're still seeing issues on Hallman right there. So what is our recourse when something doesn't go exactly as planned?
So it's literally gonna be a pipe that we put into the Hallman Street. So
I got a question about that, Stan. Your low point elevation was in that property is probably lower than the Tallman Street invert, which means you may have to get an easement and go through other people's property.
we're not planning that. So the plan is, and we have to do this, is we have to capture all the water, treat it for 100 years storm event, and then we have to connect directly to city sewer. That is there is no variance, there is nothing we can do other than that.
Where's the connection?
It's on Hallman Street. There's
What
a big.
elevation is it at your invert elevation you're connecting to?
I do not have
What's
that.
the elevation low point of that property?
Well, it's not the property, we only have to capture the impervious. So we have to capture the roof and any paving and then go through it.
Right at the bottom of on your line?
What?
Are you gonna let all the water run until the back part
part of your line, on the property line?
No,
Meaning-
we're not allowed to do that. We have to connect to the city storm system. It's not, the city code does not allow you to do that. That has been allowed since 1980 something, I think.
Does that include, in terms of the runoff that would essentially go to the other side, the non-Holman side of the structure? Like you have to capture that and send it to Holman?
Yes.
I appreciate all these very technical questions. I thought this was more of a conceptual conversation, so
Okay.
if we could just, it's past
Some
8
of-
o'clock
some
out
of
of
the
respect.
questions are
Yep.
technical and they need to be
Thank you.
addressed.
Thank you.
It's ridiculous. You can't cut off people because they've got legitimate questions.
Excuse me, I raised my hand.
I know.
Thank you.
I'm just saying.
So if we
like-
could please just advance through the presentation, see all the options, and then we can start discussing as a community. And if you would like to discuss further, I'm happy to do so after this meeting, sir.
Sure.
All right, option number 2. So this option does a little bit of what you were saying before, where it actually breaks up the program into several different buildings. So there would be one building that has the services and everything with an entrance off of Howard. That's where the orange bit is. And then what we're able to do, it's easier to see in elevation, but we're basically creating cluster buildings that can then step down with the topography on Hallman. So each one of those 4 clusters would have its own entry off of Hallman, and it would be at grade on Hallman instead of having the internal circulation mean that it has to be higher than Hallman. So big operational difference is that the residents have to go outside to see to get to the amenity areas and to the outside, but they've got their own circulation through the courtyard.
Is this also 65 units, give or take?
Yes, same number of units. And so the way that ends up looking is on Howard, there's the larger building on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side, it changes to the cluster style, which then steps down and is more of a house scaled of a development.
How many parking spots?
It's the same number of parking spots.
So you said that there were gonna be 6 parking spots for services, but then there were only 4 parallel parking spots. Where are the other 2?
They're on the backside.
Is it possible to put more parking in the backside?
Potentially.
There's also a lot of parking that's underutilized on the church, except for Sundays and services, right?
I just hope you guys know how bad it is on Hallman. I live on Hallman and Howard, so I'm right across. It is impossible, and I have to park on the street. If 2 people park, there's barely enough room to get through. And, you know, that's the case all the way down that street. It's a serious issue.
We can ask the city to make it one-side only parking. I mean, that would be the solution.
Then you don't have, people can't park. There's not enough room to park.
But so that's like, so because you're an existing resident, you can park on a public street, but future residents can't?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying we're putting
There's no
high
room for
density
it,
housing in a residential neighborhood, 65 people. We're counting on them not having parking, but, not having cars, but we don't know that. Because I personally have worked with homeless people, and I know a lot of homeless people who do have cars. So I find it really dismissive of.
We're not being dismissive. We do have a data set. Happy to share that traffic study. But we have a lot of data.
A lot of data on what?
On car ownership rates with our target audience. I haven't seen what you've seen, so all I can talk to is what our couple thousand people are experiencing that we see in the continuum of care.
Well, I'm just saying, if it's a lower density and there's more parking, then it encourages people to get cars, because almost every single person, in order to be productive in Atlanta, will be getting a car. A car doesn't cost $24,000. It might cost $1,000, it might cost $500, but it is a reality. And I don't like the way you're looking, because it's very dismissive.
I mean, when you can't afford to eat, you can't afford anything. It's saying they have to have a car. We're going to do everything we can to not force them to own a car.
I don't want to force anybody to have a car. I want them to have the option to have a car. And I know that is a very bad street for parking. That's all. And you're talking about having six social workers there. Not to mention, they may have people who are visiting them. It's not just about the people who live there. It's about if people are visiting them. And I'm telling you that that street is very congested as it is for parking. I'm not saying because I'm an existing resident that I don't expect other residents. I'm saying we're putting in a larger density of housing. And with that comes visitors, there comes and more Amazon trucks, there comes all kinds of things. It's not just as simple as just saying, you know, that these people in your past experience don't have a car.
Okay, I think that point's been made.
Can I ask about this scheme? Going back to my original
Sure.
thought, would it be possible for, in this scenario, for the guest services building, and then maybe instead of the cluster all the way down Hallman, another building that would be the corner and face Howard to be designed in a historical Foursquare, or, I mean, there's 20 houses we could choose from on how Howard to say like, oh, these two houses facing Howard will look exactly like the historical homes on the street. Does that make sense?
We can definitely look at that.
Yeah, break up the scale and the.
So you could do that, and then maybe the cluster idea is interesting, like going down Holman, but facing Howard Street, if I drove down the street and I had no idea, I might think those houses were built in 1910, the same time that my house or Janie's house or Andre's house or whatever was built. So that, I think that's one thing that would go a long way for me, to be like, this is awesome. This feels like a neighborhood. Like it feels scaled, true to form. It fills out that corner. The corner lot could have a wraparound porch that would feel awesome historical.
Make it look the same.
Second thing for Stan, there's been a lot of conversation around density that we've bounced around. Could you just talk really quickly? 60 units, 48, 36, 24. Because I think the question we have to answer as a neighborhood is, how much density is okay for us?
So it's, yeah, I mean.
Like 60, 48, 36, 24, what changes in the
It's
services in the program?
So it's a math error. There's a couple math errors. So a lot of these costs are fixed and we're kind of fighting that math. There's no ideal number. You know, you start getting under 40 because we worked with Reynoldstown for a year. So we had this conversation for a year because they were very focused on units count. And what we found is as we got lower on the units, it became really tough to make all the math work.
For, when you say all the math work, for the services or for construction or both?
Everything,
Okay.
everything. It was
get the grants for construction.
the utilities, everything started adding up. Management costs. I mean, having that property manager is.
So can I have one follow-up question? And
Sure.
I know I'm taking too much time.
Yep.
Effectively, are you saying for the conversation around density, in order to get this type of housing at 30% AMI, that the church would be the operator of and we would get the services for, it's really, it can't go lower than 40 to 45 minutes. Is that
We haven't run the math. The issue is.
Maybe 36, like it gets, I'm just trying to get to a number that's like, you can't go lower than that or the entire project changes.
We have to crunch the numbers 6 different ways. I mean, it's not an easy answer because also our math's moving because unfortunately our federal funds are moving on us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I think the point is you're trying to serve the homeless in our community, and Pastor, you mentioned that you want to help the Kirkwood community, but this is 3 times the number of homeless people that we have in our community, from what I've heard you say.
It's true.
So we have 40 to 35 that we know of in the community.
You said 20 to 30.
20 that I know are long-term.
May I?
20, yeah.
Stan did speak inaccurately. The case manager from earlier, Tracy, pointed out that 35 are in the community.
Yeah, that I know 20. I know the name of 20 homeless people in Kirkland.
I will say, 35 that I have purposely looked for. We have a lot of forest in Atlanta. We have another case manager, Ms. Knowles, who's also going to be working in this neighborhood. If anyone would like to talk to her about unhoused people in your neighborhood that you're concerned about, I will give you her information. But we are still looking for people because, again, there's a lot of forest. We don't know how many people are in this area.
Do they all qualify?
If they've been living outside for a year and have a mental health diagnosis and they have low enough income, which most of them do, they qualify.
But yeah, like Daryl, I lose Daryl for months, and then suddenly he pops up, and I see him all the time, and then I lose him again.
He goes to different neighborhoods.
Yeah, well.
Can I say something about that right quick?
Yeah.
So, I live in Kirkwood. I live on Bixby Street. If anyone has, folks that have spoken to people that are unhoused in Kirkwood will realize that a lot of the unhoused people in Kirkwood are from Kirkwood. You understand that? And like, imagine that.
live in a place, you grew up in a place, you lose your home, and you stay in that neighborhood. How much love you have for that neighborhood, how much respect you have for that neighborhood, and honestly, you have to watch your nose more than I have to watch my nose. Because you rely on the neighborhood and the people around you to support you. So I'd be more worried about putting 65 of me in that place than I am worried about putting 65 in that.
You also live in Bixby, which is not right down the street with two little kids, right? So there's a big difference. Just keep that.
I have.
Bixby is a little bit further away. I mean, I have no problem with any of it. I'm just saying it's a little bit different.
I think the big question is the density.
Wait, there's a lot of crosstalk. What?
Our neighbors who are unhoused here, would they have first dibs, or is it somebody who's already in the pipeline, who's already applied for programs and so forth?
So it's a delicate dance. The reason we talk Rebecca and in-town carers and the city into paying for it is so we can get them in the pipeline. I hope they're not homeless in 4 years. My fear is based on like Sharon and Calhoun and Reggie and all those people, they're not gonna go in housing that's not in Kirkwood. So the answer is they're gonna get that housing because the longest we take to build it, they're gonna sit homeless because they're not gonna leave the neighborhood unless Presley Woods gets an opening.
But they don't get openings.
They don't. Nobody. Yeah. No. It's 8.5 years.
And to everybody's concern about safety, has anyone ever had a negative experience with anyone at Presley Woods? Because they are lovely people there. They are very good neighbors. If you've ever talked to any of them, they're nice people.
And was it Michael? Michael loves bananas.
Is it a 4-year project? Is that the date?
I mean, that's if I
Eventually.
started. Yeah. If I start tomorrow, it's 4 years out.
Got it.
And we're not starting tomorrow.
Construction for the neighbors on Holman, or is there a projected timeline specific for construction?
There is not because we need to have a lot of
I think
conversation.
the question is duration of construction.
Oh,
Once you
duration.
start
Sorry.
construction-
The neighbors in the very immediate vicinity.
Once you start
what would
construction,
be
how
the
long?
Duration of construction.
It would probably be about 18 months because the stormwater, I try and start the stormwater first because I don't want to flood somebody's lovely pool who knows my home address.
I have a question. In your experience, does a project like this with so many unhoused people, does that affect the neighborhood's property values?
So that's a great question. Georgia Tech actually has done a bunch of research, and what they've seen is there's actually a 12% rise in property values in neighborhoods that have affordable housing versus not.
How did you decide that under 30% of AMI was the right highest need demographic audience for Kirkwood?
I mean, I could argue, so the answer is, I don't know what the highest is. I could argue it's 20, it's everything, right? I mean, the city needs, the mayor wants 20, we need 50,000 as a city.
It's very low. You got like under 30, under 50, right? Under 80. How did you decide that under 30 was where you were going to target for this development?
The answer is because we had some conversation. There wasn't a huge exploration. I think we've been talking, 3 years? There was a huge exploration. We looked at various activities and the missions aligned when we looked at this. Everybody agreed.
Is that what you're saying? The
The
missions aligned?
missions would align with the church. I mean, I feel like that was the conversation.
The mission for the church, not for the neighborhood?
That's why we're having this conversation.
Well, that's why we're having it.
Yes, what I'm just trying to understand.
I do have a good question about the conversation, right? So I found out about this particular meeting via text chain, and I live right down the street. So there was something that was passed around and sent out in people's.
Yeah,
I don't think I got the question out. How did it determine who got notified this was happening versus who didn't? Because I tell you, I didn't find out until somebody when they say, "Hey, are you aware of this?" And I just I have no idea. And here I am now, part of the conversation. But it would have been helpful since I live right over there to be notified about it.
So we started with a very close radius. It was only about 30 houses that got it.
I live less than, so I'm not sure why my house wasn't included, because I live right over there.
I don't know where over here is.
Delano.
What?
Delano.
I did not paper Delano. We picked Hallman, Saunders, and Howard.
Out of curiosity.
And we didn't even go all the way very far down Howard. It was really, could you see it? Were you really going to be intense? And we were going to do a planning charrette. We were going to do a bunch of planning charrettes, and then we were slowly going to expand and work with Kirkwood. And we're still going to do that. but this meeting is a lot bigger than, it's really hard to get feedback with this many people and kind of guide and have a conversation, kind of get, and have that audience, that
Can
test.
you help explain how the concept of why Holman would be impacted, right, from your viewpoint, but not Delano or even further down Howard?
Yeah, I mean, Holman, I mean, you heard the concerns about stormwater and parking, and they're looking at it every day. I mean, they're right at Howard and Holman.
Delano's one block up, right?
It is,
What's
it
the
is.
difference in your mind between Delano and Holman?
I mean, you were gonna be part of the conversation.
Sounds like you're volunteering to pay for Delano for the next meeting.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have everybody's emails. The next meeting, we're gonna do we'll do an email blast and everybody can come.
So, and I guess, can you speak to that? So, and I'm really speaking to the next piece, which is, I think the original vision was that that this would not be a one and done.
No.
This was gonna be a series of conversations. And I just wanna make sure that everybody's on the same page too, that this is not the final conversation.
No.
And that what you see is not a final concept. It was it's exactly what we intended, which is we appreciate, and I know we can get heated, we can get passionate, and that doesn't upset me or anybody, right? You should care. This is your neighborhood, your property. So we appreciate and value all of these things, the feedback, the questions, even the technical questions. We haven't gotten into the actual drawings of blueprints. They've only done sketches. So when I say we're preliminary, we're very, very preliminary. Yeah, we've had conversations, but we literally have just gotten to the point of even putting sketches up. And then we took the sketches and said, congregation, what do y'all think just about the concept and the sketch and how this will look? And then we said, before we even get further, let's talk to those that would be right here. And then the next conversation would be, let's expand the radius and expand the radius. And then we would eventually have to get to a zoning meeting and then so it's an iterative process. And that was the vision. So, and I didn't put the flyers out, but I apologize because it was no intent to try to exclude anybody.
I'm just trying to understand the difference,
Yeah,
right?
but I think that's what I'm explaining.
We wanted a smaller, tight group and then expand it. It's my fault. I'll take the blame.
But I wanted to just say that because I want to relieve any anxiety, because I don't know where you may have gotten any information, but I know that you may not be the
Facebook.
only person
Yeah.
who came here with the presumption that, because misinformation happens, right? But I want to make sure everybody leaves here understanding that this isn't a zoning meeting, and we're not constructing anything tomorrow. We want to know those concerns. We want to know so that we can take that back and say, okay, hey, this is the community's concerns from a density standpoint, from a water runoff standpoint, from even an aesthetic standpoint, so that we can put all that together and then say, as we have continued meetings, what works for us? Because I consider the church a part of the neighborhood the same way. So what works for us? So that as we are having to pass it and live with it, as our potential residents would live with it, we can all be on the same page that this is a viable solution that works for everybody. So I just want to put that out there, and I'm gonna turn it back over. I know we're coming up on time. So
Yeah, we're coming.
Updates come through the KNO.
Yes, eventually it'll come through Canada. But we're far from it.
Just general meetings.
I mean, that's KNO's decision. I'm not an
I would
office.
say, like, as an owner on Holman, I wouldn't have even seen the flyer at my door. So I'm curious, like, just if there's a plan for, like, just future communications. If
Yeah, we
there's
took
an
everybody's
list.
email address.
Is there an email list that we can?
Yeah, we have an email list that Larry, we're gonna
Yeah,
assemble.
leave it out, because
Yeah.
I didn't put my email, I put my phone number.
Yeah, that's why we put emails, so we could do email blasts.
I didn't put it.
Yeah, Tim, sorry.
There's a whole alphabet of soup of organizations involved here, some of which I've heard of and some of which I haven't. But a few times you've mentioned the city of Atlanta being involved. So I was wondering if you could touch on what their piece of this puzzle is, because I don't have great faith and confidence in the city of Atlanta, the organization that took 8 years to repave Cab Avenue, 13 months to replace the no parking sign in front of my house, just fired the OIGs and routinely overcharges me for water service, to be a good steward of something like this in perpetuity. I understand they'll have a great ribbon cutting and they'll get the shovels out, but 7 years on, and a couple mayoral changeovers later, what's their piece in this pie, and how should residents feel about handing something like this over to a municipality that routinely disappoints them?
So they would just be a funder. So all they would do is be one of the parties to write a check, and then they would be one of 6 or 7 organizations we're doing oversight reports to. So that's really their role. And then, you know, obviously the mayor, you know, he's the head of the CEO of the city, so that's why he comes out. But, you know, they would be involved. I don't know what to say about that. I could just say that, you know, they would be our regulatory body, and then they run code enforcement if there's an issue. They'd
You
be
can
involved.
understand why residents would be skeptical about putting all their eggs in the basket of an organization that, like, when given the opportunity, continuously disappoints them.
I mean, I'm not putting my eggs in that basket. I'm putting my eggs in as a neighbor on Warren, putting my eggs in the basket of Turner Ame, who I've known 20-something years. I mean, that's who I trust at the end of the day, is Turner Ame.
Yeah, just a quick question. You mentioned being close to a grocery store and public transportation, but I heard that maybe MARTA is not gonna be running on Hosea anymore, so I'm just curious how important. I mean, I'm not sure what grocery store you're referring to.
Lidl's walk. It's 10-minute walk shed is considered good, and there's going to be MARTA on Memorial. It's, you know, and so there's services on Memorial. The cab health service is right there. Down Hosea is Whiteford Health Clinics. You know, they got dental. We do have access to vans and all that. I mean, we have a very good walkability. We're not a food desert. We have a lot of services.
So,
Define food desert.
I'm not gonna. We have
I'm
a.
just curious, I mean,
so Presley Woods has been there for a long time, but they have 40 units and 1.67 acres. This is 0.66 acres, and you wanna have like 60 units.
So
That's creates a big problem, obviously. And in order to do that, you've gotta push all of these buildings like really close to the street, which is out of character with the neighborhood, in addition to it being a townhouse community, which, I don't know, it just seems like if we could get a smaller density here, you know, like 20 units or 15 units, there would be much less tension.
So, I mean, there were several questions there. So Presley Woods was, you know, built in a very different era of Kirkwood. You know, how land prices are a lot different. So that always is part of the puzzle. That was built under suburban zoning. We can't build that type of suburban development anymore in